Happy Friday! I'm bringing you pink hair today. It was blonde this morning and now it's back to pink. Thought, what better day to have pink hair than for our bonded book club discussion. So, in addition to pink hair, because this momentous day of having a bonded book club end on a Friday, which has not happened historically, if I'm correct. I think they've all been on like Tuesdays or Wednesdays. Because this one is on a Friday, I'm bringing you pink hair and wine, boxed wine. But we're taking it up a notch. And the best part about this day, we're going to be discussing some very important topics. Sam just talked about our news media, and today I'm going to be talking about privilege, and she's going to be talking about some racism stuff. But we're also going to be talking about some really fun and interesting lighthearted topics like Facebook and all kinds of other stuff. So, to start off our discussion today, I'm going to be discussing the privilege principle, which if you have your I'm Judging You book by Luvvie, it starts on page 82. And privilege is a really interesting thing to be discussing right now. I think it's a topic that people are becoming much more aware of. At least it's something that I am noticing. But to start off our discussion of that, probably a good idea to define what privilege is. And Luvvie gives a great definition, in my opinion. She says that privilege are the things not within our own control that push us forward and move us ahead from the starting line. Privilege is never having to notice when you are reflected in movies or in boardrooms because you are always reflected. And I think we can honestly all start thinking of examples of what that privilege looks like, just from those definitions. But some examples of privilege would be your skin color, your race, your sexuality, your gender or your gender identity, your education, the amount of education that you have. Growing up in a first world country is an example of privilege. Your economic circumstances, your religion. Some religions are much more culturally accepted depending upon where you are than others. And being able-bodied. So privilege really hits on a lot of different issues, not just on racial issues, but is brought up in the race context a lot in this specific chapter, but also just sort of in our culture right now. People are discussing it a lot. So Luvvie sort of takes the discussing race and racial issues angle in this chapter, so that's sort of what we'll focus on more, but just keep in mind that privilege affects a lot of different issues. So usually when I am having a discussion of privilege, immediately the person that I'm talking to, especially in South Carolina, becomes incredibly defensive. They feel like they're being attacked. And so my first question is, acknowledging my privilege makes me uncomfortable. Did I do something wrong? The answer is no. You didn't do anything wrong. Acknowledging your privilege, according to Luvvie, does not mean that you are admitting to doing something to purposefully contribute to someone else's oppression or marginalization. Nay, friends. It means you recognize that some part of your identity puts you in a better position than others. It also means that whatever majority group you belong to has likely contributed to the oppression of another. What makes this conversation so tough is acknowledging that, especially I've noticed with white people, is that they are a part of the problem, whether it is directly or indirectly, and the indirectly component is really what makes this conversation tougher for them, and knowing that you need to do something to be a part of the solution. So acknowledging your privilege, just acknowledging it is generally not enough. You've got to do something to try and remedy the issues that privilege perpetuates. So you didn't do anything wrong. You can't help your privilege. But once you know about your privilege, you then have an obligation and a responsibility to do something to remedy the problem. So, why does knowing about privilege matter? We need to admit that some of us in life had a head start. and aren't just flourishing on our strength alone. So I think that Sam in her video before me sort of talked about how we are all in the race of life. And privilege, if you look at privilege as a race, in theory, we're all at the starting line. We're all starting at the same time. When the guns go off, we all take off running. Perfect world, sounds great. Privilege takes into account that because of certain people's privileges that they were born with, they are able to take off sooner, or that some people don't get to take off from the race at all, or they have to wait to take off. And so this idea, especially in American culture, this pull yourself up by your bootstraps idea, that you got to where you are in life because of your merits, because of your abilities, and entirely on that, not because of your race, your economic circumstances, your parents' connections, your growing up in a first world country. Privilege requires that we acknowledge all of those, and that we didn't just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and get to where we are in life. That maybe where we are is because of our skin color, or because of our education, the ability that we were able to get into certain schools or afford certain schools, or because of who we know, because we have great connections. So privilege takes all of that into account, and that's why it's important to know about your privilege. And it also helps us to understand other people and why they are where they are, and why certain communities are where they are, and why we need to do something to try and remedy that. What is the effect of not acknowledging our privilege? Luvvie says, eschewing our cultural differences erases our history and very relevant events of the past that have led to our present situations. It dishonors our ancestors and the work they've done, and it lets people off the hook for centuries of race-based denigration and injustice. Excuse me. So basically what she's saying is that by not acknowledging our privilege, I noticed that for many people, they're like, that wasn't me. Oh, it was all my, the people that came before me. I didn't do any of that. By not acknowledging privilege, we are perpetuating a system that is already in place that will ensure that certain groups of people in the United States, and this can be not just in the United States, but anywhere, are kept down and oppressed. Acknowledging privilege, we are taking all of these things into consideration and noting them and figuring out how we can do better, how we can help bring people up with us, how we can ensure that everybody is taking off at the starting line at the same time, and whether that's through legislation or personal efforts or whatever, hiring practices, that we are making sure that everybody has the same opportunity and chance. Again, it also, the effect of not acknowledging your privileges, it furthers the idea that you got to where you are in life solely based on your merit. An understanding of privilege is knowing that you did not probably get to where you are in life entirely based on your efforts, that you probably got to where you are in life because of a whole slew of other issues. Luvvie says, quote, being quiet about race or not wanting to acknowledge it is being part of the problem, no matter how non-racist you personally are. My question, are people that don't want to acknowledge or discuss race propping up a system of racism? The answer is yes. And the reason that you are able to not acknowledge issues of racism or any other issue of oppression at all is because of your privilege. You have the privilege to not do that. This can be really hard for people to acknowledge because they only want to see, for the most part, in my experience, that their direct actions are what affect oppression, what affect racism. And they don't see their acts by omission or their unwillingness to discuss issues of racism or oppression as furthering a system of oppression. So getting over that hurdle is really tough, but an understanding of privilege gets you over that hurdle. And you begin to understand how doing nothing is actually furthering all of these terrible systems that we've created in the United States or anywhere. Luvvie says, racism is not just perpetuated by the people in white hoods. It's also the well-meaning people, the well-meaning, I have black friends people who help it remain upright and unmovable. They refuse to see the part they play in the system because they're too busy making sure everyone knows how not racist they are. Listening to black music and loving Beyonce does not give you a free hall pass out of the system of structural racism. Just because I enjoy a salad from time to time does not mean that I'm a vegetarian. Being able to live without having to be defined by your skin color is the hallmark of privilege. So when you are feeling uncomfortable, an understanding of privilege, an understanding of oppression, and an understanding of these systems is asking that you walk headfirst into that discomfort and that you tackle it head on and understand how you are contributing to that and also how you can do better. So to end our discussion on this particular topic, my last question is, how can I do better in regards to that privilege? So an understanding of privilege and oppression, how can I do better? Because that's really the big question here. Luvvie offers 3 ways to do better. First, forge real friendships with people who don't look like you. Second, stop saying you don't see color and acknowledge your privilege. And number 3, check your friends and family who have not. This is your farm and those are your sheep. Gather them and tell them to get their shit together. So that can be really hard to do, especially with friends that you love dearly and that you respect. And it's not that you don't respect them and having conversations about these things because it's that important. It really is. So we need to be talking to our friends who are very privileged and don't understand their privilege and do not understand systems of oppression. And we also need to be talking to our families about it. We have a duty. And that's what she's asking us to do. So I hope that you have found this discussion helpful. I hope that you will go check out I'm Judging You by Luvvie. It is a great book, especially as far as like introductory language goes on a lot of really tough topics to handle. She tackles them with comedy and such an interesting writing style. It was really, really easy to get through and really, really enjoyable actually. So I hope you'll check out this book and I hope that you will join us in an hour, not even an hour, sorry, at 2:30. Sam will be back and I will be back at 3:30 and we will keep the ball rolling. Happy Friday, guys!